A Hearthstone adventure!
Welcome to the worst card in Blackrock Mountain. I'm sorry, Warriors. So you've got your Whirlwind, which costs 1 more mana, and if you've got 12 or less, you deal 3 damage. That's kind of nice. The flavor text on the card, at least, is really good. It said something along the lines of, "Hey, finally, Warriors have something that actually becomes better than mages." It's true. Like it's strictly better than an Arcane Explosion. That is true. Wait, no, it's not, because Arcane Explosion only deals damage to the opponent's stuff. So, here was my thinking. In theory, you could replace your Whirlwind with Revenge, and then when you actually get to the late game where you're like struggling to hold on, you play the Revenge, and like the opponent is Mech Mage, and it's got like 4 guys out with 3 health, and then you play your Revenge, and it's awesome, and then you win the game. But in all other cases, it's like 1 more mana than Whirlwind, and Whirlwind is only really good because it costs 1 mana. That extra mana, it's really tough to pay for it. And you get to 12, and then you Revenge to come back. That's gonna be great, but it only works out in Disney movies. In Arena, this card will suck, because Whirlwind tends to already be bad, and Revenge is costing 1 more. Actually, in Arena, this card might be better than Whirlwind, come to think of it. Because you're more likely to be able to pay the extra mana to have the chance to do extra stuff. It's probably going to be comparable to Whirlwind. Not that you can ever pick the 2 cards together, since Whirlwind is basic and this is rare. And anyways, a card that you really shouldn't be paying attention to. I'll say this last thing about it. It is really good against Muster plus Quartermaster, if you happen to be at 12 or less, against a Paladin, which is like never going to happen. So the good news is, as a Paladin, you don't have to play around Revenge.
So Revenge is basically a 2-mana Whirlwind, and then if you have 12 or less health, you deal 3 damage. If you have 12 or less health for 2 mana, wanting to deal 3 damage to everything would mean that the game would have to have shifted in a ridiculously aggressive fashion. I hope I don't play that version of Hearthstone, honestly. And because of that, I don't think we're going to reach that stage, at least not too soon, hopefully. So as a result, I think this card kind of sucks. If you're at 12 health, this card might save your ass against like a zoo deck, but it might not do too much in other cases. Whether it will replace Whirlwind, I kind of doubt it. It is possible though, because Whirlwind often you just use to combo a bunch of stuff, and sometimes you just save Whirlwind until the end of the game when you want to combo with Grommash. And when you want to combo with Grommash, I mean, if Whirlwind costs 1 mana, Revenge costs 2 mana, it's still basically the same thing. If it hits Grommash for 3 damage, it's still basically the same thing. So it might see fit in Control Warrior, but I don't think the game will move to that much of an aggressive stage for it to be that useful. But maybe. Maybe.
Revenge is an interesting card. The first time I saw it, I thought it was just unplayable, because Whirlwind's just 1 mana. I mean, you're almost never going to be below 12. But then the more I thought about it, the more this card seems pretty good to me as a one-of. Like, Whirlwind is still fine most of the time at 2 mana, which is what you're going to be playing this as probably 3 out of 5 times. You're going to play it for 1 damage. But then the fact that it's like in your hand lets you completely change how you play the game. Like, you can spend a turn just like equipping Gorehowl or something to like, and do the math so that you'll be below 12, and then you like blow them out with this. And then once people are more experienced at playing with and against this card, you'll see people like just not attacking Warrior below 12 on some turns, just like they're playing against Handlock with Molten Giants. So I think like just playing one of this card and threatening that 3 damage is pretty powerful, because at some point Whirlwind's going to be good. Like, the 1 damage is going to come up at some point, so it's never going to be completely dead. But then you get that blowout where you deal 3 to everything. It's just pretty powerful, I think, and it's going to change how people play against Warrior. And if people play too scared of this card, that makes Warrior even better, because if you don't have it, then they're giving you all this free life. We'll see, though.
Revenge, 2-mana Whirlwind. If you have 13 or less health, deal 3 damage. And 12 or less health, deal 3 damage instead. I don't think it's very good. Whirlwind isn't great. I don't even know if this is better than Whirlwind. Probably worse. Having 12 or less health, like if you want a card that you have 12 or less health to be powerful, you can just play a Molten Giant, 0 mana for 8/8 pretty much. So I don't have a lot to say about this, so I don't think it's good.
Revenge is a like if you're 12 or less health, I guess you're already dead and you don't really need the 3 damage Whirlwind. But it does give warriors a way to deal with like muster combo right now. But like the 12 health is really weird, right? Because even if your opponent paladin is paladin and musters on turn 5 or something, you're pretty much not going to be at 12 or less health. And if you are, you still need this card. And are you going to keep this card against paladin? I'm not really sure. So I think this is not that good.
Going for 2 mana. Nah, I don't need Whirlwind for 2 mana.
Okay, so you're paying 2 mana for Whirlwind. And if you're about to die, you get an AoE for 3. You get like an explosive sheep. I'm not sure how exactly that card came about, but I mean, I'm trying to figure it out. I mean, I understand that it's meant to synergize with stuff like Frothing Berserker, Grim Patron. I mean, Grim Patron is the obvious go-to synergy for Whirlwind effects, especially in Warrior that can enable it with Warsong Commander, but I feel like this card just... I mean, the question becomes at that point, and this is a really important question. You're playing Whirlwinds, right? You're playing Death's Bite, right? That's pretty obvious. You want the Whirlwind effect. You're maybe playing Unstable Ghoul, because you can use it with something like a Warsong Commander to sacrifice it and get yourself a free AoE right away. Or you can use it just straight up for an AoE effect. So, now you've got 6 cards dedicated to AoE effects, right? You've got Death's Bite, you got Whirlwind, you got Unstable Ghoul. When the fuck do you get to play Revenge? I feel like the decks where it belongs are decks that contain Frothing, they contain Grim Patron, they contain Warsong Commander, Raging Worgen even. They contain all sorts of Enrage-oriented cards, but to say that Revenge is going to be some kind of go-to option, even for the Whirlwind War, I'm not convinced. We'll have to see. I mean, if Warriors find a way to reduce their health intentionally by using weapons for removal, right? They use weapons with no care for their health and they just punch minions down non-stop. And then they armor up with shield blocks and shield maidens and everything. That is possible, but... it feels like a bit of a gimmick to get the extra 2 damage in AoE. I don't see it being that amazing. Then again, I may be proven wrong, and I hope I am. I always hope I'm wrong. That way, people can actually point out, "Hey, Nox, this thing is much better than you thought, and the card is gonna be amazing." And I like it to be the case, but I don't see it, and I feel like Warriors got shafted again. You got Arcane Explosion on one end, which is objectively better than the first part of this because it deals damage only to enemy minions, and this deals damage to all minions, which, you know, is somewhat good if you're playing Enraged stuff, but in general is worse. And it also deals 3 damage if you have a little bit of an upside, and Fireball is better than Mortal Strike. So Warriors, I'm a little sorry for you. This seems to be a pretty shitty moment. This is not a card you wanted to see.
And we've got the Flamewaker. Mage Rare, 3 mana 2/4. After you cast a spell, deal 2 damage randomly split among all enemies. So the closest thing that this card bears similarity to is that Goblin Blast Mage. That Blasted Goblin Blast Mage, which is a 4 mana 5/4. Deal 4 damage randomly split among enemies if you have a mech in play. The Flamewaker, oh, it's a Flamewaker, not a Flamewalker. When I compare it with that, it just seems to be tamer. So what are some likely combos with it as stands? What are some low-cost spells which are commonly played? You play with the Frostbolt, 5 mana, 2/4, you deal 2 damage. You play it with the Unstable Portal, basically cards you would play anyways. I don't think the missiles are good enough. Like, off the top, I don't think it's going to be played. The combo costs too much, and a 3 mana for just a 2/4 with This is a nice bonus, but I don't think it's quite good enough. Yes, there are spare part possibilities, but I don't see this as being good enough to overtake any of the cards that are already in Mech Mage. But I mean, you would try it out, I'm sure. That seems to be the right place to start. Already, by the way, Mech Mage cuts a few of the cards that give you spare parts, like Mechanical Yeti, just because they needed the room for other things. In Arena, this card should be quite good. 3 mana, 2/4. You're gonna have spells. You're gonna have the luxury of holding this until like turn 5 and then casting it with your Frostbolt or Flame Cannon. Yes, it's not so good if you play it and then you have to play another spell, but say you play it and then you have spells later. This is the type of card which could like out-control your opponent. It's when you think of it as the Knife Juggler for spells, it gets a little bit of a different spin on it.
Flamewaker. Oh man, this is probably my favorite card of Blackrock Mountain, if only because I really like. I just really like this card. I don't know if it's the strongest, but I do think it's very powerful. 3 mana for 2/4. After you cast a spell, deal 2 damage, randomly split among all enemies. You can kind of compare this to like Violet Teacher, Gadgetzan, Archmage, in the fact that like you get value from it after you cast every spell. I do think that effect is probably stronger than the 1/1 from Violet Teacher, and like the earlier you can get this kind of effect, the better, because you can combo it easier with spells. Like it's kind of like a must-kill minion. A 2/4 for 3 isn't exactly bad. Something interesting is that Mage doesn't have a lot of good 3-drops if you're playing tempo mages, other than Kirin Tor. Having a 2/4 that really gives you a lot of benefit from spells is really good. This is like a way where you can get this kind of like a pseudo spell power and also get benefit from playing secrets and arcane intellects and unstable portals.
Flamewaker is also one of those cards where I don't really like. At first, I think it was pretty good, and then I think it's just pretty bad, cause like people think this is insane because it's kind of like a Blast Mage, but I argue it's not really like a Blast Mage because if you do Blast Mage, you're developing the board, and when you use spells, you're not developing the board. I treat this as like a 3 mana 2/4 that gives +2 spell damage. So it's slightly better than the 3/3 mech that gives 1 spell power, the Suit Spear, yeah? But it's not insane. Like, I don't think this is gonna be too good.
Flamewaker, on the other hand, this is the card that Flood Mage was missing. I'm super excited for this guy. This is gonna push Tempo Mage like it's gonna cement it as a tier 1 Mage deck. I think the deck will be better than Mech because of this. Because mech decks are a little linear right now in how they're built. You just kind of play dudes, go face. If you mess up on your curve, you lose the game. You don't have a lot of control in your draws. There's not a lot of flexibility. It's easy to play against Mech Mage. Whereas Tempo Mage, it has a lot of the same strengths as Mech Mage. You put shit on the board early, you snowball if you get ahead, and you have a lot of burn to go to the face late game. I think Tempo Mage might be the future of the class, and this card will definitely be a centerpiece of that. So we'll see. Definitely going to be praying to have coin every single game with that deck now, but Flamewaker is very strong, and I really like this card.
Flamewaker, 3 mana, 2/4, super solid stats. As a 3-drop, you really, especially in Arena, you're just trying to catch up on the board because you missed a 2-drop, or you're trying to steamroll out of control. And this is kind of like the catch-up variety, which is pretty good, and the effect is unbelievably strong if you have a lot of spells. In Arena, you're not likely to get too many spells. You're also not too likely to play a spell on turn 4 unless your opponent has played something that you want to direct your Firebolt towards. And if you do that, it's only really 2 face damage, so it's not really that great. So in Arena, it's good, not really the best thing ever, but good. Good cards in Arena are nice to go by, so when you have a choice between rares, you don't have to pick, Cold Light Oracle, for instance. As far as constructed, people keep playing the aggressive stuff, and I imagine they would because we kind of know basically what we're going to expect in the large picture, so I think we'll expect a lot more aggression, and this card will make mage decks with a lot of spells very good, much better than they already are against the small little creatures that are super annoying to deal with. So this card is absolutely awesome.
Now, why am I super hyped for this? Number one, it's not a fucking mech, so I won't have to play Mech Mage. That's the one thing I'm pretty happy about. And again, the other thing that I'm super hyped about is, you would be able to double the damage that your spells would normally do, or at least give them an effective, quote-unquote, 2 spell damage. And the cool thing about it, and that's what I really, really think is the single most important factor, is the fact that it functions exactly like Wild Pyromancer, in that it only triggers afterwards. Like I use Blizzard, right, or Cone of Cold with Flamewaker. If it kills 2 minions, the Flamewaker will then trigger and hit the weakened minions like Wild Pyromancer would. Instead of being just, you know, straight up spell damage that might overkill stuff, this will never be quote-unquote wasted. Flamewaker works with any spell at all, including, but not limited to, the coin. And the cool thing about that is that it might even incentivize people to play stuff like Arcane Missiles or Mirror Image, right? Flamewaker says, well, finally I can make a mage deck that's not the most boring crap in the world. And that's at least interesting. Whether or not it's gonna see play at all still leaves to be discussed. The amount of bursts you can set up with this guy on an empty board is beyond crazy. As I said, the fact that you can play this, you know, on turn 10 with Flame Strike, you're gonna be, let's say you kill minions for 4, the ones that survive are gonna be the ones taking the damage. You're not gonna be overkilling them. And also, the obvious polymorph synergy, it might just kill the sheep. You play this, and then you sheep on turn 4, you might just kill the sheep. You won't have to spend 2 mana of your tempo to ping that sheep, which, although it looks irrelevant, is a really big deal.
We got the Hungry Dragon. It's 4 for a 5/6, which is basically as good as any other 4-drop in terms of stats, and it has the battle cry to summon a random 1-cost minion for your opponent. So yeah, this is really broken. It's especially broken in Priest, because in Priest, especially in Arena, all you really want to do is have the biggest minion on the board. So if this is like bigger than their 4-drop, then you just steamroll out of control. And this really, really helps you do that. And the battle cry, it might seem negative, but as with most things in Hearthstone, things that look negative are often positive. In fact, very positive. In fact, really, really, really positive in some cases. So what do I mean? Well, let's say you have played a Raging Worgen on turn 3 and you need to enrage him. Well, what you can do is on turn 4 you can play this guy, then enrage your Worgen, then proceed to own your opponent's face or kill another minion. So you can use it in enrage mechanics. And also, one thing I used to do, I used to play like Leroy just because it spawned minions for my opponent, so I could combo him with Mind Control Tech, because a lot of people in Arena actually play on Mind Control Tech, and in Constructed, it's just kind of hard for some classes to actually play at 4 minions. So this card helps that. It just puts crap on the board on their side. So if they have like 3 creatures, well, it's Hungry Dragon, Mind Control Tech combo time. So it makes that card much more playable. And again, just because people usually gravitate towards aggressive decks, making it so you could use him against control decks with this card combo makes it absolutely incredible. Oh, and it's a dragon, so it's really good at that, because it probably needs a lot of dragons for your dragon synergy. So probably a lot of people are going to play this card, and it's going to be really awesome because all the random X cost type of effects just are pretty cool. I mean, the Shredders in GVG are probably some of the coolest cards in it.
Hungry Dragon, though, on the other hand, I like this card because it's a very fat body. Now, people compare it to like Pit Lord, yeah, because it's a 4 mana 5/6 as well. But like summoning a 1-cost minion for opponent can be kind of exploited. Like if you run Priest, for example, you can Cabal it, you can Shadow Menace it, whatnot. If you have like Frogman Berserker, you can run it in and be very happy about it. You can play this in with Mind Control Tech even. I think there's a lot of fun stuff you can do, but you need to know what the 1-cost is, right? So you do need to like keep in mind the stuff. You should usually attack first, by the way, before summoning Hungry Dragon, unless you're scared of like Dust Devil, because like Dust Devil is just like whatever, right? It takes 6 damage is a lot, but usually I think you do attack first.
Hungry Dragon. This card has gotten a lot of hype. The standard 4-mana card, which people think is good these days, is Yeti, although it should be noted that Yeti isn't being played, nor its mechanical counterpart. Even in Mech Mage, Yeti was used for a little bit, but most of the time, mechanical Yeti is actually not that popular right now. Druid decks used to run Yeti. Currently, it's not that popular in it either. So we establish a 4-mana 4/5 isn't that great in Constructed. A 4-mana 5/5 would be incredible. And this is a 4-mana 5/6. So that's really good. Of course, it comes with a downside. Summon a random 1-cost minion. The nice thing is the 1-cost minion generally is going to have 1 health, other than in the cases of getting something like Zombie Chow or Flame Imp. One comparison that I've seen is if you play the Hungry Dragon and your opponent just gets a 2/1, then you've basically played Tall Strider, that 4-mana 5/4 vanilla card, which is not very good. In addition, your opponent can buff the minion you give him with cards like Abusive Sergeant or Power Overwhelming or Savage Roar or any such thing. So I think I can establish that Hungry Dragon isn't that good if you play it with no plan to kill your opponent's 1-cost minion on the same turn. The question then is, how can you do that reliably? And one pretty reasonable way is to play Rogue, and you have your dagger out, and then you kill the opponent's guy with your dagger for free. This is a great card. I said in Next Remus review when I reviewed Deathlord, I really like cards which come with a drawback, something that you have to play around a bit when I reviewed Deathlord. This one does require a little bit of playing around. And of course, the big thing is it's a dragon, which used to not be a thing, but now it's a thing because dragon matters. In Arena, Hungry Dragon's going to be pretty good. Even in the worst case where you play it and you have no plan to immediately kill the opponent's 1-cost minion, then you got yourself a Tall Strider. But in the case that you do, then you got a 4-mana 5/6. The health is immense. It can take down a lot of things. In Constructed, I don't want to understate how good it could theoretically be, but I also don't want to overstate how good it can be. So basically, in the worst case, it's a less good Tall Strider. In the best case, you kill the opponent's 1-cost minion for not much cost, and you've got a huge minion, which can take down the likes of cards like Sludge Belcher without blinking an eye. Kills the Loatheb and still survives.
So it looks so good because it is when it's good, obviously. It has a lot of similarities to Loatheb because if you have board control and you play it, it's much better, because you can kill off the 1/1 pretty much immediately. I don't expect us to see as much play as Piloted Shredder. I'm just going to start off with that. I think Piloted Shredder is insane. I still think it's the best 4-drop in the game. But Hungry Dragon is a dragon, and it's just like good on its own. So, for example, a deck like Rogue, this is the card I'm most excited for Rogue. I think it's like the best Rogue card in this set. Why is that? Well, Rogue gets the hero power, and I think 54% of the time, the 1-drop that you make for your opponent is only going to have 1 health. So if you just have a dagger equipped, you just play your turn 4, 5, 6, kill their guy. If you're not playing against Mage with Fireball, or like Shaman with Hex, they're going to Hex you for 4-drop, who cares? This is just insane for a tempo deck. You get a 4-mana 5/6. The drawback is negligible. You could have Backstab instead. If your opponent plays it and you're playing Rogue, you can sap it, and then you get a free 1/1. It's just a very, very good card for Rogue. I can't stress that enough. It's definitely one of the dragons that like rewards you the most for being a dragon-based deck. It's just like one of the best dragons to be playing to enable your other dragon card. So I expect Hungry Dragon to see a lot of play in things like Paladin. I think Dragon Paladin will definitely be a thing. And it just seems like a great card, honestly. I don't think it'll take the place of Piloted Shredder in things like Druid that don't really have the time to deal with 1/1s, because then you're kind of playing like a Lost Silt Strider. If you give them a 2/1 and you don't have the ability to kill it that turn, then you're basically playing a 4-mana 5/4, which is just not that good. It is a dragon though, but again, in decks like Druid, I expect Piloted Shredder to see more play than Hungry Dragon. But this card's still very powerful. Most excited for it in Rogue, and I definitely think it's good.
Okay, so what 1-mana cost minions do we have in Hearthstone? 1 toughness, it's durable. Okay, so shitty, good, shitty. Yeah. Okay, so I would say about 75% of 1-drops have 1 life, 1 toughness. Not so impressed of those. Something like Shield Bearer might be really painful to deal with. But overall, it's like, if you summon Zombie Chow, sometimes it's even good for you. Because it's like mid-game. For mid-game, you don't really want to see Zombie Chow on the board. I mean, you don't really want to draw to Zombie Chow. It's early game minion, let's say. And for mana minion, it's a minion you will play in mid-game, so you don't mind having Zombie Chow on opposite side of the board. It's fine. So all 1-drops, they're like not so exciting. They can easily be dealt with. It's nothing like Millhouse, Mana Storm, whatever. So this is basically a 5/6. It's a dragon with random battle cry, which is hate. Like, it's not enough to add Piloted Shredder. Let's add another minion which will be like decent, playable, and still get dragons, so it will be good for Dragon Synergy decks. But let's make it random based. Because everyone likes random, right? That's how we should make new cards. Yeah. Anyway, I think this is a playable card for dragon-based decks.
So I guess the cool thing about this card is it really rewards you for having board control. It also allows you. It also has like very good synergy, for example, with Fire Axe for Warrior. And Warrior is one of the classes that can really benefit from going dragons because it's one of the classes that already do use a lot of, maybe not a lot, but some dragons like Alex draws it. And also it goes late game as well, the Warrior control deck. One of the important things is that this is a dragon, and you can use this with Tinker, the Technician, the 3/5 for 3 mana. So I think this is powerful. Originally I thought that this was like really powerful, but I've had to downgrade my assessment since then. There are a lot of 1-drops that could be really annoying. Things like Flame Imp, maybe even Zombie Chow, and sometimes this card might seem like a win more card because if you don't actually have board control, like say with a Fire War Axe or a minion to kill their 1-drop, it might even potentially be worse than a Yeti or a Shredder. And you're not really even competing with Yeti at this point, you have to compete with Shredder now. If they just get a 2/1, they attack your Hungry Dragon with it, becomes a 5/4. 4-mana 5/4 is not even nearly as good anymore. And they can do worse than that, like Snowball, like for example, power roaming the minion. Again, I think that the most relevant part of this card is the fact that it's a dragon. And I think I see this card being used in Warrior the most because it has a lot of synergy with Fire War Axe. And I can see it being used in Paladin as well because Paladin has probably the best dragon, I guess, in the 5 mana for a 5/5 dragon that makes your next dragon cost 2 less. So you can potentially get a Hungry Dragon for 2. And also, Paladin is another class that can potentially deal with these random 1-cost minions really well. If you go with a Muster for battle on turn 3, a lot of times your weapon can kill the 1-drop, or you can just simply use a couple of your dudes. So
It's a 5/6 for 4 mana. Like what? I don't understand. So we had Show and Yeti. That was the go-to 4-drop in the past because a 4/5 for 4 was really good, especially in Druid decks that could ramp it out on turn 3 or innervate it on turn 2. A Paladin Shredder, the go-to 4-drop nowadays. I mean, it is a 4/3 for 4 that has the mech synergy built into it, and it also gives you a random 2-cost minion. So this is probably the closest you're gonna get to the Hungry Dragon as far as the cards that we have in the game now. So which one of these two is stronger? I would say if they had to go, 1 versus 1, the Paladin Trader might come out ahead by a tiny margin. The reason being, you play Paladin Shredder, I play Hungry Dragon, I give you a 1-drop. Your turn comes around, you use your 1-drop and your Paladin Shredder plus something else to kill my Hungry Dragon, and then I lose my dragon, you still have a 2-drop with the Shredder. However, that's not the way things are gonna go. When you play Hungry Dragon, odds are you're gonna be able to kill whatever 1-drop you give to your opponent, because you get the initiative. It doesn't spawn as a death rattle, it spawns it right away. So I make, people make good calls, I make good calls sometimes, but I make so many bad calls that this might be a bad call, but I think Hungry Dragon might become a bit of an auto-include in every deck just because of what it does. Like, you don't... It's like a no-brainer. It's just so strong. It kills Sludge Belcher. And its stat line is just unparalleled at the moment. And the fact that it actually kills what we used to consider the vanilla 4-drop, the Yeti, without even dying, and in fact it's left with 2 health afterwards, that means it doesn't die to hero powers. That is completely insane, but we'll see exactly how this goes. A 4-mana 5/5 would be good, like Anubar Ambusher. But a 4-mana 5/6 without a drop, well, I mean, there is a drawback, and I love, cards that have a drawback. I think that those are the most interesting design-wise. Hungry Dragon kind of falls in that category, but the average 1-drop is a 1/2 minion-ish, like Secret Keeper, the Goldshire Footman. The lowest they can get is something like an Elven Archer, or Young Dragonhawk might become a problem. The best they can get is a Flame Imp or Dust Devil. On average, though, you expect a 1/2 to come out. More so even than a 2/1. So Hungry Dragon effectively is a 5/5. If they get a 1/2, it becomes a 5/4 if they get a 2/1. But since you get the initiative on killing that minion, that drawback becomes pretty much irrelevant. Unlike Anubar Ambusher, unlike Deathlord, unlike many cards with drawbacks, Hungry Dragon's drawback can be negated like this. It takes very, very little time. But yeah, we'll see how this card develops, but I think this is going to become one of the strongest cards in the expansion.
Fireguard Destroyer. This guy's pretty big. I mean, what is he, like an average 5'6", 6'6"? For 4 mana. The interesting thing about him is he kills the 4 mana dragon neutral. That might see a lot of play. The one that summons a 1 mana minion for your opponent. So, Fireguard Destroyer. Another overload card, but it's a very efficient minion. Is this what Shaman needed to really stop being the worst class in the game for once? It can't hurt. I mean, it's playable. Fireguard Destroyer is pretty strong and proactive. I mean, the way that you beat Hunter is not by putting a bunch of cards like Vitality Totem into your deck and losing to all the control decks. The way you beat Hunter is just killing them first, and I think this card helps with that strategy, so excited to see another proactive Shaman card, and it seems pretty good to curve Unbound Elemental into this. It's very powerful.
This is 6 mana. 6 toughness, 4 drop, it's really solid, and it has at least 4 power. I think I would play 2 in my Shaman. Just solid. And only 1 overload. It's not so much.
Pretty big body for 3. That's a water elemental essentially. Water elemental is a 4 mana 3/6, but it has a pretty cool ability. Fireguard Destroyer has 1 overload attached to it. Not a big deal. It's your turn 5. Being overloaded on turn 5 is not always the biggest deal. Battlecry gain 1 to 4 attack, so it comes in with a self buff. It can actually get itself up to a 7 attack, minimum 4/6. So the minimum value of the Fireguard Destroyer is a 4 mana 4/6, and the turn 5 overload is much less problematic than the turn 6 overload, where you want to get that fire elemental out, because typically you end up with a really sticky situation where you have no way to play Fire Ellie. Well, now turn 4 you got the Fireguard, and turn 5 you've got yourself an overload, and then turn 6 Fire Ellie.
Fireguard Destroyer. Very good basic stat goodness card. The way that averages work, this is a 4 mana 5.5 attack /6 with overload 1. And there's not much to say other than that's pretty good. Of course, the overload means it's a 5 mana card, so on average you're getting like a 5 mana 5.5 /6, but in actuality it's better because you can play it on turn 4. It's kind of nice because you play the Fireguard Destroyer on 4, and then you usually want to play Fire Elemental on 6. So your turn 5 play, you can play another 4-drop, which probably doesn't have overload, and you're all set, and it's all good. Really good basic card. Yes, sometimes you get your 4 mana 7/6, then they BGH it, but you would probably be running this card in a deck with Dr. Boom and Neptulon anyways. So yeah, this card's really good. Very basic, but good. And it'll see play in the value mid-range / control decks. In Arena, this card is top tier, because stats are king in Arena. This card's better than Yeti. It's probably better than Hungry Dragon in Arena.
Fireguard Destroyer. This is actually really powerful. It's basically, Shamans don't have a lot of great 4-drops right now. Oftentimes, there's the Pious Shredder. Not a lot of whole other things you have as 4 mana as a Shaman. The good thing about this is you can play Fireguard Destroyer on turn 4 and still play the Fire Elemental on turn 6, because you overload your turn 5, so you can just play something else. And this is not going to mess up your Fire Elemental turn. This card is very strong. 4 mana for... Basically, it's a 4 mana for a 4/6 to a 8/6. So anywhere between... Wait, no, it's 7/6. Yeah, so anywhere between a 4/6 and a 7/6. The 7/6 does get BGH, but again, like 4-drop is kind of the limit. I guess it's technically around 5 mana, but it's not... Well, first of all, it's kind of rare that it even gets BGH, but it's not that much mana, so it's not so brutal to get BGH'd as well. I mean, I can just... I basically think this is going to be a core Shaman card. It's one of the... So yeah, that means that this card is a very powerful card, because it's rarely that a card is added that becomes a core card, like a game changer for Shaman.
Oh, this is also a very... I think this is also a good card. It's like we have another War Elemental, by the way. This is like the new 4 mana 3/6. But of course it can become a... It either becomes a 4, 5, 6, or 7/6. What can I say? 6 health at turn 4 is pretty insane. This is what they want. This is like way better than the Dumal Shaman that they released. The Dumal Shaman has the same overload effects, but it has 4 health. But 6 health is pretty damn badass. I like it. I like it. At worst, it's a 4/6 for 5 mana. It's fine.
So 4 mana overload is a bit bad if you do want to play a lot of the other overload cards. It kind of knocks out Earth Elemental, but you know, again, with BGH still being in the meta, unless the card sees some change, you know, you might not want to run that card. Actually, you might not want to run this card because it might gain that extra attack, but still, it looks pretty good. It looks really good in some cases. It's just the overload, it's kind of hard to gauge. So this card, at worst, is going to be a 4 mana 4/6 with overload 1. And in terms of stats, if you compare it to like Druid of the Claw, which is a 5 mana 4/6, it's basically the same as that. At that stage in the game, most minions have taunt if they're big enough. So yeah, it seems really good. It's just difficult to really gauge where Shaman's going to be at. It does feel like a very powerful card. In terms of Arena, I would really love to have this card. In Arena, you can sacrifice that tempo drop if you get a value increase. So in Arena, this might just be one of the best Shaman cards saved for Fire Elemental. And I look forward to that because Shaman is really not that exciting to play, and this card kind of changes that up a little bit where it's some flavor and it kind of opens up a few things.
Chromaggus! I remember fighting this guy in World of Warcraft. I'm very surprised to learn he's a dragon. I read the wiki, and apparently there's some lore where Nefarian was performing some sick experiments with Corehound / beast type things. But there you have it. 8 mana 6/8, and it's a dragon. Congratulations. It dodges the fun, also known as Big Game Hunter. Obviously a really slow card. It's the type of card which is directly comparable to Kel'Thuzad. Kel'Thuzad is better if you already have a board. Chromaggus is better if you don't already have a board. There's actually a lot of people who just compare it to Kel'Thuzad and say like, oh, well, this is obviously worse than Kel'Thuzad. But the thing is, Kel'Thuzad is often bad because when you have no board presence, then you play it and it's just a big guy. But with Chromaggus, that's a guy they need to deal with no matter what. This card is obviously too slow if the metagame is fast, but in a slow meta, I would be very happy to play this card. The greed value player in me loves this card. It's a neutral which draws cards, and even better than draws cards, duplicates your cards which are already presumably good. I love it, even though it's clearly terrible if the format is fast. But if the format is slow, it's incredible. In Arena, this card is going to be pretty good because it's big and it's not as bad as Kel'Thuzad when you're behind. Like, it's actually basically got taunt unless they're so far ahead and are about to kill you. Chromaggus is really cool. Hooray, Chromaggus.
Now, this is basically a value generating card, right? Because you're basically getting more card draw out of your deck than you otherwise would. In effect, it kind of acts as a pseudo duplicate, because let's say you were to play Ragnaros and it died and you got 2 copies of it, well, you might be getting yourself another Ragnaros, you might be getting yourself 2 Flame Strikes. So the possibilities with this one are endless. If you could get multiple copies of Lotheb in your deck, you would essentially be very, very far ahead. And what's interesting with Chromaggus is that it allows you to get copies of that. You can get yourself 2 Sludge Belchers. You can get yourself a huge amount of the same card. What's cool about this guy is that he's a 6/8 and not an 8/8, which means BGH does not function.
Oh, this is really good in Paladin. Oh, this is really good in Paladin. Why this is good in Paladin is because of their class card, but an 8 mana 6/8 Chromaggus is really, really good because it dodges BGH. Obviously, it needs to survive a turn to do something, and even if it survives a turn, it just gives you card draw. So it's not like it's like as good as like a Ragnaros or whatnot, but it's more late game centric. I don't know. When you have a lot of card draw, Chromaggus can be pretty insane, right? I mean, imagine if you Chromaggus into Powered Shield, you get 2 Powered Shields, and you cast both the Powered Shields, and you get double the cards. You get like, you know? Like, it's insane. Any card, any class that can draw cards, like a 1 card, can play this. Like Druid. Chromaggus if you draw Wrath, you get double Wrath and double Wrath for two cards, and then the 2 cards duplicate themselves, and they get super happy and whatnot. But yeah, I think generally this is an okay card. It'll be fun for sure.
You double draw every card that you'd otherwise draw. Now, if it costs 8 mana, it's kind of difficult to draw immediately. So there's that, but there's a few cards that they reveal that you guys will see makes this card a little bit more playable, especially in like Paladin, that kind of stuff. Now, there's not too much that you could do to draw cards otherwise. I mean, yeah, you could maybe have a few Loot Hoarders or an Acolyte of Pain in play, and you slam down Chromaggus and, you know, start trading to get that value off the board. You can kind of make it work that way, and it might be used that way, but, you know, it's not really a card that deals with aggressive decks. It's basically like one of the super slow control-y options. Basically, I expected every legendary release to be, and unless the game changes into a slower meta, which I am not sure that it will, this card will not really see too much play. But it's really cool, and I'll certainly have a lot of fun with it. In terms of arena, 6/8 is strong enough that it'll probably survive a turn, and getting that extra draw is pretty clutch. You don't often get to draw like too many cards in arena because card draw is fairly rare, so this card is maybe a little bit above average in terms of arena, so it's all right. There's certainly some cool things that can be done with this card, as I mentioned, but it really relies on a very specific situation in a game that you'd probably win anyway, so that's kind of the downer.
So it actually works even if your Chromaggus just stays on the board. So let's say if you play it and your opponent can deal with it, you draw 2 cards per turn. Stats are not so exciting, but this means it's not vulnerable to BGH, which is kind of important too. I don't know. Sometimes KT gives you such a huge advantage. I think this minion is actually bad. It's so expensive and situational. Will it ever happen even?
Your hand. It has good stats. I mean, 6 mana, 6 or 8 mana, 6/8. You know, KT, good stats. Is it better than KT? Probably not, because KT gets immediate value. All you need is a board that can trade in, and then KT is insane. Chromaggus like has to live for a turn. I guess you have a 6/8. Basically, you get if you draw a minion with it, it's gonna take like 2 turns before it did anything for you. And if you draw a spell, then I guess it's pretty good. I just don't think it's powerful enough. If you compare its stats to Boulder Fist Ogre, since most of the reason you're playing it is the stats, it's just, I think it's just not good enough, honestly. But the fact that it's a dragon has a lot more value than it did before. So just because it's a dragon that doesn't get big game hunted, just because it's a dragon that you can play on 8 instead of 9, and just because the cards that reward you for having dragons are all insane, maybe this will just see play in like every deck, just because you need some kind of dragon, because cards like Blackwing Corruptor are just too stupid not to play. So I would not be surprised if that's the case, but I don't think it's going to be. Chromaggus is like, it's fine, but it's not. I think it's like on the weaker end. It's not OP for sure. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. It's like a fine card, a little bit weak, that I would probably not put into most decks, except it's a dragon, so that shoots its value way up.
This is kind of a tough one. I guess like I would have to compare this maybe to something like Sneed's Treader. It's like a value card that doesn't die to Big Game Hunter, but also doesn't really have any immediate effects either. So another card you can compare this to is Ysera. I think Ysera and Sneed's are kind of similar. They're, I guess, very good in control matchups, but against faster decks, it doesn't provide a taunt or something like Ragnarok's effect that immediately kills something. And it's like a card that's like a really grindy card. One thing that's really interesting about a card like this is in Hearthstone, when you're playing a control mirror, it's like kind of weird because every game actually comes down to fatigue. Not so that everyone always fatigues out, but fatigue is always a concern in Hearthstone when you're playing, say, warrior versus warrior control. And I feel like most of the time Chromaggus is probably going to be used in late game control decks, and I think it's a little bit weird to use Chromaggus in a lot of the decks like that because it doesn't draw from outside your library like Ysera, so it doesn't actually, I guess, like boost the total strength of your deck, like the sum of 38 cards. It doesn't give you something like Duplicate or Thoughtseal, allowing you to run like 31, 32 card decks, something with Ysera. So I think that's actually a problem. So I mean, I can even see with a lot a lot of cards, like something like ramp for dragons, because I know like Paladin has a dragon ramper. Maybe it's going to be used more in mid-range decks where you can afford to draw additional cards because you're not really planning on going into fatigue. I actually feel like maybe this is a better card to top out your curve as a mid-range deck compared to a control deck. Ultimately, this is one of the only dragons that you can play because there is the dragon theme going on and there's just not that many dragons. When I looked at like the first two cards and when I just saw the spoilers, I thought that a lot of the cards were really strong, but looking at the whole set, I think the biggest problem of the dragon theme right now in Blackrock is there's just not a lot of great dragons. There's a lot of good cards that benefit from having a dragon in your hand. There's just simply not a lot of good dragons, so this is the only 8 mana dragon is another thing, so.
Demonwrath. It's 3 mana, deal 2 damage to all non-demon minions. So basically, Blizzard really wants people to play demon warlocks. And I'm okay with that. I think Demon Warlock was almost a thing, but it used a lot of non-demons, and now with this card, you're incentivized to use more demons. The other Warlock card they're introducing is a demon, and yeah, it almost makes sense. So Demonwrath is good in one end because, yeah, you might basically just do a Consecrate for 3 mana, which is super powerful. Warlocks already have a lot of board clears, so it's not that relevant in that case, but you can also strategically deal 2 damage to creatures that you want to take damage, like a Nerubian Egg, for instance, or perhaps you're maybe playing some kind of enrage mechanics. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. There are some options to make this card awesome, so I think those will be explored, and it's a bit too difficult to decide whether that will turn out well or not. In Arena, I think this card is great because Hellfire is a good enough card in Arena, and I feel this card is just better. While 3 damage is often way better than 2 damage, 2 damage will often be enough, and if you're playing as the Warlock, and because Warlock is not that popular, at least right now as an Arena class, it's probably going to end up doing way more damage to your opponent's creatures than it is to yours on average.
So it's like Consecration. Doesn't deal damage to the face, but it's not so important. Problem is, it's like, even if you play Demon Luck, you still have a bunch of non-demon minions. It's good against Egg. It's like, let's say you play Egg, Jude plays Shade of Naxxramas, play Demonwrath. You kill the Shade and you trigger the Egg. Such a huge lead after this play. Sounds good. It might be a replacement for Hellfire in demon-based decks. Oh, actually, yeah. This is the best replacement for Hellfire in demon-based decks. Voidwalker and Mistress of Pain. When you play this stuff, you don't even need Hellfire. You need like Shadow Flame if you play Power Overwhelm. But Demonwrath is acceptable. I'll probably play one.
Because of Demonwrath, which is some of the coolest artwork in the set. Excited to get a golden version of this card. But deal 2 damage to all non-demon minions. This seems pretty powerful to me. I mean, on top of just being good, like, if you think of it like a Consecrate, if you build your deck around it, it's a 3 mana Consecrate. Consecrate's an insane card. So you just build a mid-rangey demon Warlock deck, you put Demonwrath in it, all of a sudden you have Consecrates in your deck. Not with equality, but still. A pretty powerful card. Honestly, I think Demonwrath is very powerful. I like both the Warlock cards that came out here, and maybe they're good enough to really push the class into being like undisputed tier 1 like it always should be because of that hero power. Blizzard's been very careful about never printing a 1-mana Warlock card again. The fact that a Warlock hero power is what it is completely warps what kind of neutral 1-mana cards they can even make. So it's interesting to see that we see more 3-mana crap, but this is pretty good 3-mana crap, so I still think the class will be very powerful, of course, and it'll never be like bad. Will it be tier 1? Depends on how well Demonwrath is positioned. Is it going to kill off common things being played? I think so. Also has pretty good synergy with those cards that are cheaper if you kill stuff, so I'm excited to try that out.
Looks like it's meant for demon locks, but Perhaps it's good even in non-demon decks, or with in decks which have minimal amounts of demons in them. I mean, it costs 1 less mana than Hellfire, and dealing 2 damage to everything for 3 mana isn't even a bad deal. So this is quite a good card as well. In Arena, this card is going to be much like Hellfire, and that was a good card in Arena. I expect Demonwrath will also be a good card. I mean, Zoo found it sometimes iffy to include the Hellfire. You might see Zoo move a bit more demony. This does trigger your own eggs, which is pretty nice. If there's a lot of 3/2s out there, then Demonwrath goes up in value. If it turns out that there's more Mech Mage type cards, which are a lot of 2/3s, then you're still going to want to use your Hellfire. But a cool card, nice AoE, synergy for demons, me likey.
You can actually see a card like Demonwrath making sense because, you know, before there you can't play all Demon Warlock, but now there's more and more. Perhaps you can play a very heavy Demon Warlock and then add in things like Nerubian Egg and maybe Dragon Egg, where you don't really mind dealing 2 damage to them. In fact, you might even prefer to deal 2 damage to them and run a card like Demonwrath. If you can think about it as like a 3 mana deal 2 damage to all enemy minions, not your own minions, it should be pretty strong, but unfortunately, even then, it's still not going to be too great. I mean, Consecrate is 1 more mana to deal 2 damage to only enemy minions, and it deals 2 face damage as well. I don't feel like this card is going to be that strong. Even if the mid-range Steam Locks take off, I don't see this being a big game changer.
I don't really know about this card. This would be a very demon-centric card to be used on. I think a good deck for this card would be like a demon deck with Nerubian Egg. And then you just play this, nuke their board, and then activate your Nerubian Eggs, you know, something like that. It's a cheaper Consecrate, so of course, if you can play it well, then yeah, it's gonna see play. If you can utilize it well, then it's gonna see play. But of course, every time you put a non-demon minion, then this card gets slightly worse.
Please, Blizzard, give me a non-demon Hellfire, and we got exactly that. Except we didn't get Hellfire because it doesn't damage us, and we didn't get a Consecration for 4 mana. We got a Consecration for 3 mana. If your deck is comprised only of demons, you have the best board wipe ever. Whether or not it's going to be working and functional leaves to be determined. Then again, you know, it's not a Hellfire. But even if you don't play demons, fuck the demon synergy. Just disregard it completely. What if you just don't have anything on the board? It's a 3 mana Consecration. So Warlocks now have Dark Bomb, which is really good. It's like a Frostbolt that doesn't freeze, but who gives a shit because it's generally killing the thing that it's targeting. Now they've got their Hellfire that they already used. They use Shadow Flame. They got Implosion as a control tool. Now they're getting Demonwrath, which is essentially the ability for them to use a Consecration on the board on turn 3, so that's earlier than Hellfire, without any, you know, drawback. Because they're not actually playing anything. I mean, that's crazy. This card is insane. I mean, you can play Control Warlock with only Mistress of Pain and Imp Gang Boss and Void Walkers and Void Callers. I don't even care. Like Demon Handlock, for instance. You could play that with Demonwrath. You would have no drawback for the longest time. Until such a time as you play Defender of Argus and Sunfury Protector and your Ancient Watchers. But until that happens, you're golden. So, I think this is one of the most interesting cards. It's a I mean, when you compare it, you know, card for card with Consecration, I get that Consecration only targets enemies, but Demonwrath could be made to target only enemies, and it's a class that already has an amazingly, you know, solid amount of AoE, so that seems pretty solid.
Dark Iron Skulker, rogue class card. So dealing 2 damage to all undamaged enemy minions looks pretty strong. Kind of a Consecration with the caveat that they need to be undamaged. When Backstab was changed from deal 2 damage to deal 2 damage to an undamaged minion, people in general thought it wasn't going to be a big deal. And yes, Backstab is still a great card, but it just turns out that it does play into it sometimes. So you're paying for a Consecration for 4 mana. Consecration's a pretty good card. Usually run 2 of in Paladin decks. You pay 1 extra mana and you get a 4/3. That's a really good deal. And not just that, it's a bundle deal. So not only you get your Consecration for 4 mana, but then you pay 1 mana to draw a card and then play a 4/3. So when you sell it that way, Dark Iron Skulker sounds super amazing. That said, you could also sell it some other way, like you deal 0 damage because they're already damaged, or your opponent's playing control deck and the effect doesn't really matter, and then you get a 5 mana 4/3. Overall, I do like seeing a card like this because Rogue is a deck which I think could do with another playstyle. There was the Miracle Rogue, there was the Oil Rogue now, and throughout the time there's been like some face rogues, there's been some value control rogues. But this is clearly a card which is fitting the control-ish rogue, and I like that. Is this going to be enough to make control rogue a thing? That remains to be seen. And will this make it into Oil Rogue? I'm not entirely sure. They already have quite a lot of AoE. In Arena, this card will be amazing, because it will actually be that 4 mana Consecration plus 1 mana to draw a card and then play a 4/3. That's really good.
Dark Iron Skulker is the next card. Oh my goodness, is that an insane card. Oh my god, is this crazy. 5 mana 4/3, pretty, you know, bad body, you could say. Battle Cry, deal 2 damage to all undamaged minions. Did anybody say mass backstab? I think somebody said so, because that's what I'm hearing. Now, the drawback of backstab, the fact that he needs to damage an undamaged minion, is actually pretty impactful. And the fact that it has a slight drawback can be played around. If you know what you're doing, you can generally make sure that you set up good backstabs anyway. Dark Iron Skulker is essentially, for all intents and purposes, acts as a Consecration or a buffed up Fan of Knives, because usually you have like a Fan of Knives that you use like Blood Mage Thanos on, or an Azure Drake. Azure Drake prep Fan of Knives for 2 damage, draw a card. Dark Iron Skulker says you pay 5 mana, kind of like a Drake, and you get a free Fan of Knives on everything that's buffed up with spell power, and you even get a 4/3 on the board, which is almost equivalent to the Drake. And yeah, I mean it's like a packaged combination of Consecration and a 1 mana 4/3. It's an amazing card if you set it up properly, if you play around it properly, if you make sure that it's going to give you value. It's going to be crazy. Against aggro decks, I think Rogues got themselves a really amazing tool, and I think it's pretty cool that they did get that.
Dark Iron Skulker seems pretty powerful to me. Skulker, it's a dude, so it gets you like board presence, and it's also removal. All in one card. It's very efficient. Honestly, just looking at it, I think it's going to be pretty powerful. Card looks very good to me, and I don't know, the stats are kind of small for something that expensive, and maybe the effect won't be that insane, but I'm pretty sure this card's like very, very good. And I look forward to playing 2 of it in Tempo Rogue. The thing about Rogue is, all you need in that class to make it be good is you just need to stick an idiot that's hitting them in the face, and then you just kill all their stuff. And this card is so good for that strategy. It gives you a dude in play that hits them hard, and it kills stuff.
I kind of like the design of this card. I really like the undamaged enemy minions part of this compared to just 2 damage to everything like a Consecrate, because one of your win conditions as a rogue is basically to kill the enemy's minions on the same turn you develop minions, and you really snowball from there. Like, that's rogue's specialty. You know, you have cards like SI Agent, you have weapons, you have things like Prep, you have weapons that can stick from last turn. Like, most of Rogue's game plan is based around this concept, and this is a way where you can add a powerful card that doesn't get too powerful, because if this could combo with Backstab, it can both Backstab and Skulk or something. It's just too easy to take that initiative as Rogue. I know, like, when you're playing against Rogue, the most painful thing is when they do finally take initiative.
I don't really like this card as well because it's very overcosted. I don't play a lot of rogues, so obviously my judgment of this card might be a bit off. But I don't foresee this being played nearly as much, because it's very specific, right? It's not like a Consecrate. It's like to all undamaged enemy minions only. But then in the same case, when you're a rogue, you don't really damage minions, right? You just kill them off usually.
Okay, let's compare it to Bomb Lobber. Deal 4 damage to random enemy minion, and it starts at 3/3. Stats are almost same. Battle Cry, deal 4 damage. This one deals 2 to every undamaged minion. So it's like you can, I mean, the fact that it deals damage to undamaged minion, you can combo it with Backstab, and it's kind of sucks too. It's a 4/3, stats are not so impressive. But I can see any synergy right now. It's more like anti-synergy. You can't use backstop if you play that kind of Skulker. And it's AoE. Rogue already has a bunch of AoE spells. So let's say if Bomb Lobber has this Battle Cry, deal 4 damage to random enemy minion, you can compare it to Flame Cannon. Flame Cannon is kind of playable card, and it's 2 mana. So we have 3 mana, 3/3, and Flame Cannon in same card. In this case we have 4/3 with Battle Cry, deal 2 damage. So what spell does 2 damage to every single minion? Yeah, so let's say Consecration, and you have 4/3 stats. If you take a look from this side, this point of view, this minion is actually pretty good, right? But it's rogue based minion, so only rogues can use it, and rogue already have all these Blade Fury spells and kind of nice. It's a good answer for Shade, I suppose, but it's AoE. You know, yeah, if it would have been a rogue card, I would say this is insane. Let's say for Druid, this card is crazy. For rogue, your opponent won't even overextend as much against rogue because of Blade Fury already. Maybe it's more like for minion-based type of rogue decks. This might be a good minion to have. Like if you have minions and you don't have Blade Fury, then you need AoE. And then Skulker is kind of cool because it's like Consecration and 4/3 body in same card. Anyway, I think for Oil Rogue it's a bad minion to have.
All undamaged enemy minions. So yeah, it's basically way better than Stormpike Commando, and you guys probably think Stormpike Commando is a giant piece of crap. Well, it kind of is, but when it comes to Arena, he's fairly decent, and considering that Dark Iron Skulker is just an unbelievably better version of that, well, the card's really good. It's like super good. Yeah, 4/3 stats for 5 isn't the greatest, but I mean, if you do damage to 2 things, it's like better than Bomb Lobber, basically. Most of the time, kind of. And one thing that you guys need to understand is, like, from my experience, it seems that Hearthstone, after people realize what's going on, people start playing aggressive stuff on ladder. It's all aggro. It's rush. And this card stops that pretty effectively. So because of that, I think it's going to be an extremely popular, very played card. Maybe not at the start of the expansion, but after a little while, it's going to be the case.